There were 13 Water-type Pokemon introduced in the 7th generation, with 8 of them being considered competitive. Now, some older Pokemon did receive substantial buffs, and there were also just some ridiculous Water-type Pokemon introduced in Pokemon Sun and Moon as well. So let's just go and do a top 10 Water-type Pokemon for the 7th generation. And number 10 on the list is going to be Gastrodon. So actually staying in the same 10th place spot from the previous top 10 water type video, but the rest of it is going to be quite different. Now, the reason why Gastrodon makes it is because in singles, it's just a reliable Pokemon, and in doubles, it finds some pretty solid play as well, mostly because of the Storm Drain ability. The Pokemon draws in water-type moves, which can lead to an easy misplay from your opponent. Also, you can gain some special attack by either comboing it or just using it against your opponent in that way. The Water Ground typing is incredibly strong that you only have a weakness to Grass. Granted, it is a 4x weakness, but if you don't see Grass, then Gastrodon doesn't have any problems. Also, as a ground type, you do get the Stab Earth power, which does threaten new Pokemon like Tapu Koko, and then you even get access to the Scald for burning foes, and as a tanky Pokemon, you can also recover. So Gastrodon is a very reliable Pokemon, also gets access to the stockpile, can play a few different ways with like Toxic Stalling, Infestation Trapping, or anything like that, but overall, Water Ground, really good, and then just the stats for Gastrodon can back it up, and it sees play pretty consistently in all forms of the game. Number 9 on the list is going to be Greninja. Now, I honestly feel like I put Greninja just a little too low on the last top 10 list. It's still in the top 10 for water types, but it's not really the strongest water type out there, and really the biggest thing about Greninja is that it's fast. Well, now there's new threats like the Tapu Koko that just completely body it, and even if you're going to be playing the Ash Greninja with the Battle Bond, you still have to make some sacrifices, and Protean does work out in the end. So pretty much you have to hit a Pokemon super effective to get a lot of damage, but if you are looking for some kind of speed and sweeping on your team, then Greninja might be a nice Pokemon just to kind of throw in and then have some reliable damage. Can take off in the late game, but other than that, it's just okay and a bit stronger than the rest of the water type Pokemon, so it finds its way at the 9th place slot for water type. Number 8 on the list is going to be Mantine. So Mantine got a really nice buff. It was a Pokemon that was already known to be a pretty solid special defense tank, but it ended up getting plus 20 to the hit points as well, so it gets tankier in defense and special defense, which rounds it out, but also gaining access to Roost. This is insane because tanky Pokemon really want the sustain, and now Mantine is a very reliable special defense wall. I mean, 85 on the hit points and then 140 on the special defense means your opponent is going to have a very hard time breaking that down if they're not hitting you super effective, and really on the electric side of things is where you're going to see the most threat for the special attacks. So really, Mantine plays around its weaknesses pretty well, that if you have a ground type Pokemon, Mantine should be safe, and then certain rock type moves aren't really the worst thing for Mantine, that Stone Edge does have a chance to miss, and then Rock Slide is low base power even with Stab, and since you're going with max hit point investment, there's still a solid chance that Mantine could survive that. On top of that, it's going to be a Scald Pokemon, which is going to be a big theme about this, that there's a lot of just tanky stall Pokemon out there that get to use the Scald, burn the opponent, take less damage, and tank harder, and that's what Mantine can do, that it can at least respond to the Pokemon that threaten it with those rock type moves if it is a rock typing itself, with a super effective hit and a potential burn, so Mantine gets the advantage of that, and also it can just kind of stall out, and it even gets access to the Mirror Coat, so it can massively dunk special attackers, and if you're playing with the rest of the team, then Mantine is going to be a very powerful Pokemon. Very happy to see this guy get such a useful buff and then find use in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Number 7 on the list is going to be Wishy-Washy. Now, Wishy-Washy's schooling form is just really strong, and I mean, what else is there to say about those stats right there? That the only thing that could be better is like the hit points, but since it's not really wasting anything on speed. Okay, it's a low speed Pokemon, it's going to be slow, so you can run in the Trick Room, or you can just be a bulky attacker. You take less damage than they're doing to you because you just have a 130 on defenses and then 140 on offenses. You can choose to be physical, you can choose to be special, you can mix it up with quite a bit of damage, and you have some decent coverage, such as the Earthquake for physical hits, or you can just kind of run the tried and true Ice Beam with a Surf and then try to stack as much damage on the Wishy-Washy as possible and still find a lot of success. Now also, the buff to Confusion Berries has made Wishy-Washy a very interesting Pokemon, that if it drops below 1/4 hit points, it unschools, but that's at the end of turn. So that's going to be very powerful, that if you drop below 1/4 hit points, and then you get to attack still, that gives you a chance to at least get some retaliation against the opponent. But also, the Wiki Berry, or all these Confusion Berries, they activate at 1/4 hit points or less. So either you're getting knocked out, or you're not going to be in school form because that berry's coming back, and then giving you half of your health back on a Pokemon with 130 in both defenses. And then running Wishy-Washy is going to be very simple. You max out hit points, and then you choose what you're going to do, and then you get the appropriate nature. Actually, you can even run Quiet Nature if you're going to be going for something like the Trick Room. And then we've even seen Oranguru combos. That Oranguru with Instruct can be very powerful. And under Trick Room, I would recommend something like the Life Orb. And that's kind of what you do. You just Life Orb Surf. You hit both opponents for insane damage, you get instructed, you hit both opponents for insane damage, and then you can get some decent 2-hit KOs just like that, or also just kind of convert damage, and Wishy-Washy is going to work out pretty well. It's even found success in singles Trick Room, because you just have a sacrifice Trick Room Pokemon, and then Wishy-Washy gets a few turns to sweep out the opponent. Okay, so then number 6 on the list is going to be Mega Slowbro. Mega Slowbro is a really bulky Pokemon. 180 on the defense, 95 on the hit points. Pretty much against physical attackers, the opponent is completely helpless against the Slowbro, and you get shell armor, so they can't just crit through you, and that also means you can do a lot of setup. Iron Defense is just going to make you absolutely untouchable on that defensive level. Also, you can go for a Calm Mind. That way, you're boosting your lower special defense, but also you're going to be gaining damage. And there's a couple of different ways that you can run the Mega Slowbro. Some people could go for a more offensive set by running something like the Dual Stab. Just have Psychic, because you might run to a Toxapex or some of the new crazy Poison-type Pokemon out there. So, Slowbro getting a little bit of a buff with the existence of Toxapex and some other poison types, but also when you think about it, there's just a lot of fairy type Pokemon, so there's more poison to counter that, and then Psychic's going to be pretty good. Then you just run the Scald, burn them on top of your 180 defense, and then that gives you access to the Slack Off as well. Now, this is one way of running Slowbro. There's also some other sets that you can go Iron Defense, one offensive move, and then Rest. Rest is going to be very good if you get statused yourself, but overall, if you have the Slack Off and you're just trying to take down offensive Pokemon without trying to get into any Stall Wars, this Slowbro set is going to be very good as well. And even then, you can like max out hit points, max out special defense, go for defensive nature, and you really don't need much else on the Slowbro. It does have quite a bit of weakness, but for the most part, when you're this tanky, you can at least survive it, and if you have a good response to the opponent, then they're going to be going down. Unfortunately, there are quite a lot of common threats for the Slowbro right now, so it did get bumped around the list, but overall, Mega Slowbro still a very powerful Pokemon. Also, guys, we saw this one earlier, so number 5 on the list is going to be Pelipper. Pelipper, it got a lot of craziness with its buffs, so it gets the Drizzle ability now. And that's why we don't see Politoed on this list anymore. Politoed was pretty much only viable because of the Drizzle ability, and now Pelipper is kind of showing the other side of that. But with Drizzle, Pelipper unlocks so much. Hurricane now can't miss in rain, while also boosting damage on something like the Scald or even the Hydro Pump. You can run Pelipper for damage right now because that's going to be rain-boosted Hydro Pump for crazy amounts of damage, or the Hurricane that can't miss for a chance to confuse the target. You also do get access to the Tailwind to kind of set up, and then you can even run an Ice Beam for yourself. So Pelipper, it finds a lot of ways to succeed, and its special attack even got buffed. So now it's doing more damage, can provide setup, and then it has rain. So even if Pelipper goes down, that means you open up to whatever water-type Pokemon you want to use. Maybe one of them from this list, maybe something else that's just going to utilize some crazy damage on a Hydro Pump, go for Surf, or do whatever. But yeah, Pelipper is actually a really solid threat right now. You can run like Focus Sash and a Tailwind, and then you can use that to gain enough speed to outsweep your opponent, and then just go for some mad damage after that. The only thing working against Pelipper is that it's not super tanky, so it can be taken out a lot easier than the Mantine. But no matter what happens, potential extra turns of Drizzle, potential extra turns of Tailwind, or it just picks up KOs and does crazy, surprising amounts of damage. Alright, now we're going to be going into the bottom 4 of the list, and number 4 is going to be Rotom Wash. So, Rotom Wash, it's just too good. Levitate Electric Water means you only have a 2x weakness to Grass, and you can also use Z moves now, so there's like a lot of tricky things that the Rotom can find with the Z moves. But overall, there's not really much to say about the Rotom. The stats kind of speak for itself. It's a bulky Pokemon that's hard to hit super effective, and then it just has a good amount of special attack, so it backs it up with damage. The Hydro Pump will usually catch people off guard. The Thunderbolt is going to be pretty solid. It can Pain Split, which gives it more health, and then you can even like Z Pain Split now. That's going to give you some health back while also boosting your stats, and then you can even go for something like a Will-O-Wisp. So you can burn, like this is the thing about Rotom. You just drop it in, and then your opponent gets frustrated until they lose momentum. That Rotom, since it is hard to respond with, like you plop it in, you Will-O-Wisp. Or you just do damage to their sweeper. Or you pain split and offset any advantage they have, and then you're still really bulky, and you're still doing a surprising amount of damage with good coverage. Like, Electric Water is solid enough coverage for the Rotom, and whenever it shows up, if you do not have an immediate response and you're not super ready for it, it's going to disrupt, and that's why it's just a reliable Pokemon that finds quite a bit of play all the time. Number 3 on the list is going to be Gyarados into Mega Gyarados. Mostly because, like, Intimidate. Like, you can just run Gyarados now with a Z move. Z Waterfall on the Gyarados does an insane amount of damage, but also just using it for the Intimidate utility in singles and doubles, mostly in doubles, is just very powerful. That you have, alright, Gyarados comes in, intimidates one of the opposing Pokemon, and then it can just kind of go for a big nuke on the Waterfall, or it's always just a Mega Pokemon into the Dragon Dance. So that's always something you can do. Just Mega Gyarados, get a crazy amount of bulk, get a nice typing that isn't 4 times weak to electric anymore, and now you have, yeah, 95 hit points, 109 defense, 130 special defense, and you're setting up with Dragon Dance, but also that's a 155 attack that's going +1 quite often on a potential Adamant nature. Like, Adamant hit point investment works out pretty well. Put it a little into the speed, that way you can just use one Dragon Dance and start taking off. And Mega Gyarados, it's a threat that can one-hit KO you at just +1, or also if it goes a little bulkier, gets a free +2, that's going to be hard to take down, while also just out-coveraging you and going for the KOs. And again, it comes in with Intimidate, then Mega Evolves. So against physical attackers, they get to do even less to the Gyarados, and if you can't hit it super effective, it's going to set up and then style all over you, which means you could easily get 6-0'd, because if you can't just nuke the Gyarados before it gets set up, or you don't have a bulky enough Pokemon to completely wall it out, Gyarados is just going to say bye to everything on your team, and that's going to be GG right there. As for number 2 on the list, we're going to put Suicune right here, because Suicune is just one of those mean, bulky, water-type Pokemon, and it gets to be extra scary because you can go Scald, Calm Mind, Rest, and then Sleep Talk, and there's not much you can do with this except for a Water Absorb Pokemon, but the Suicune can just wall out. There you go, max hit point, max defensive investment. Once you get some Calm Mind, you can't even take it out with electric or grass-type moves that are going to be special. Even physical ones have a hard time after a burn or something, and then it's a legendary Pokemon that does good amounts of damage while being pretty rough to KO, and Suicune's just going to sit in there as a solid tank Pokemon that's just going to work in its water type, so that's why it's on the top 10 list. Now, another thing you can do is run Suicune in doubles, because then it can use Tailwind. And isn't that just fantastic? That Suicune comes in, makes everyone on your team faster, while still being a threat that can Scald, it can Ice Beam in double, so your Dragon-type Pokemon have to worry. It can still Calm Mind, so probably get rid of the rest and just have, like, a Berry. Now it can run Confusion Berry. So, Citrus Berry, Confusion Berry, burst amount of health on a +1 while under just some kind of Tailwind boosting, and then you have access to the coverage on Scald and the super effectives from the Ice Beam, and it's just tough to deal with, because if you focus anything on Suicune, now you have a speed boosted, crazy, sweeping Pokemon next to it, and that's going to make life pretty hard. So it works really well in singles, works really well in doubles, that's why it's going to be number 2 on the list, and then number 1 on the list is going to be Toxapex. I was honestly just thinking about ending the video right there. Just number 1's Toxapex. What else do you need to say? That Game Freak, you know, they don't give Comfey a lot of power. They leave Shiinotic behind. They make Pokemon just slightly underwhelming like the Komala. You know, you see all these Pokemon being introduced that have like crazy new abilities or some potentially good stats. It's just missing 1 or 2 points here and there. It's missing the right moveset. And then Toxapex is a Pokemon that has 50 on the hit points, but 150 on defense, 150 on the special defense. So it's a Rotom, but much, much tankier. And then it has the Regenerator ability. So you can just either go full defense tank, full special defense tank. You can survive Earthquakes when you are fully tanked. You can survive super effective hits like they're nothing on Toxapex, and they can just swap out because Regenerator is going to heal you up. So there is so little risk to running the sheer bulk of the Toxapex. When you look at stats, it's not going to attack. It's just going to sit there and bunker up and then just wreck everything your opponent is going to try to do to it. But not only does it get Regenerator, it also gets Recover. So now it has built-in Sustain, on top of Sustain, on top of being one of the tankiest Pokemon to get Sustain in the game, while also having the poison water typing. Like, that does leave it open for a couple of super effective hits, but overall, it's still, it's a poison type, so it can't be poisoned in return. That could be maybe one of the weaknesses for it, is that, oh, you toxic something this filthy of a tank? You don't get to do that, but it can toxic you back, and that's going to be pretty bad. Or it can scald you and burn you if you're a physical attacker, and that could be pretty bad, and also, it runs a stockpile, so that could be pretty bad as well, because now you're gaining defenses. One tankiest Pokemon ever. At +1, +2 on stockpiles, those super effective hits, they don't feel like super effective hits anymore. It can run Haze instead. That way, if your opponent's trying to set up, Toxapex just says no, and by the way, you're toxic at the same time. You have leftover, or actually not leftovers, you just run the Black Sludge on it. You can run Citrus Berry, you can run Confusion Berry. And there's also just a couple other things that you might see on the Toxapex to either do some damage or disrupt the opponent. Instead of Toxic, you might see a Baneful Bunker. You might also see a little bit extra working with the Toxapex. For the most part, it's going to be your toxic stalling tank, and it's one of the most absurd toxic stalling tanks to ever be introduced in Pokemon. It's not only just #1 for like the top 10 best water types, it would easily make the top 10 or top 5 best Pokemon in the history of Pokemon with how filthy it is. As why I could have just ended it there. Like, you look at Toxapex, you just see on the screen right there. You don't need to know anything else about it. It's just way too powerful of a Pokemon, and that's kind of it. So if you guys enjoy the video, those are the top 10 water type Pokemon. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.